The impossible malfunction. The celestial harmony drifted silently through the void, its sleek crystalline hull no longer pulsing with the familiar azure light that signified a properly functioning quantum navigation matrix. The ship was a technological marvel, the pride of the Galactic Consortium's exploration fleet, a vessel designed to map the furthest reaches of known space. Now it hung motionless, disabled by a malfunction that had stumped the brightest minds aboard. Chief Engineer Zorlath stood before the main control interface, all four of his arms crossed in frustration as his ternary eyes scanned the diagnostics for the 1000th time. His iridescent scales shimmered under the emergency lighting, reflecting his agitation as clearly as his posture. "The quantum harmonizers remain in critical failure," he announced to Captain Nixari, who hovered nearby on gravity disks. "We've attempted 17 different recalibration sequences. None have succeeded." Captain Nixari's tendrils twitched, a sign of extreme concern among the Vasari. As the commander of the consortium's flagship, failure was not an option she entertained lightly. "Explain again how the most advanced vessel in the fleet can be rendered inoperative by a single malfunction." Zorlath's upper arms gestured toward the holographic display. "The quantum navigation matrix is an integrated system. When the primary resonance field collapsed, it created a cascading failure throughout the connected subsystems. The technology is so advanced that it self-regulates and self-repairs under normal circumstances. But not this time," the captain observed. "No, something is interfering with the self-diagnosis routines. The system cannot identify what's wrong, so it cannot repair itself." Zorlath's frustration was palpable. "I've had our entire engineering team working on this problem for 7 cycles without progress." First Officer Televen approached, her crystalline exoskeleton catching the light. "Captain, we're receiving a response to our distress signal. There's an outpost within range of our auxiliary thrusters." "Consortium outpost?" Nixari asked, hope briefly flickering in her compound eyes. "No, Captain. It's a human settlement. Proxima Hub." The command bridge fell silent. Humans were the newest addition to the Galactic Consortium, having achieved faster-than-light travel barely a century ago. Most species regarded them as primitive upstarts who had lucked their way into space travel before developing the cultural sophistication to match their technology. Humans. Zorlath's voice dripped with disdain. What possible assistance could they provide? Their understanding of quantum mechanics is rudimentary at best. Captain Nixari's tendrils waved in gentle rebuke. "We have few options, Chief Engineer. The next consortium outpost is 17 light-years away. Without the quantum navigation matrix, we would take years to reach it, even if the conventional drives were operating at full capacity." "Which they are not," Televen added. "Life support systems will begin to degrade within 20 cycles if we remain stationary." Captain Nixari settled onto her gravity disk. Decision made. "Set course for the human outpost. Maximum auxiliary power." "Captain," Zorlath protested, "Consortium protocol strictly prohibits sharing advanced technology with developing species. If we allow humans to examine our systems—" "I'm well aware of protocol, Chief Engineer," Nixari interrupted. "But I'm responsible for the safety of 2,000 crew members. Protocol allows exceptions in emergency situations." Zorlath's scales darkened in resignation. "Yes, Captain. I'll prepare a suitable explanation of our systems that won't violate security protocols." "See that you do," Nixari replied. "And Zorlath, keep an open mind. Different perspectives sometimes yield unexpected solutions." The journey to Proxima Hub took 3 cycles, even with the auxiliary drives pushed beyond recommended limits. When they finally docked at the human station, the contrast between technologies was stark. The hub was a hodgepodge of modular units bolted together, with visible welding seams and external power conduits, primitive by consortium standards. The station's director, a human named Haruki Tanaka, greeted the consortium delegation with surprising composure for someone facing 6 different alien species simultaneously. "Captain Nixari," he said, pronouncing the alien name with careful precision, Welcome to Proxima Hub. We received your distress signal and have prepared accommodations for your crew if needed. How can we assist your vessel? Zorlath stepped forward. We require technical assistance with our primary navigation system. Do you have qualified engineers? Director Tanaka nodded. We maintain a diverse engineering team. Though I'll be honest, we've never worked on a consortium vessel before. He tapped a communication device on his wrist. Maya, please report to the main dock. We have visitors who need technical assistance. While they waited, Zorlath observed the human facility with thinly veiled contempt. The technology was at least 3 generations behind consortium standards. Exposed wiring, manual interface controls, and physical switches instead of neural interfaces or telepathic controls. How could anyone operating with such primitive tools possibly understand the complexity of the celestial harmony systems? Maya Chen arrived 5 minutes later, wiping greasy hands on a rag tucked into her utility belt. She was shorter than Director Tanaka, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that immediately assessed the alien visitors with keen interest rather than intimidation. Maya Chen, Chief Engineer of Proxima Hub. She introduced herself, extending a hand before remembering that many species found the human greeting custom peculiar. She smoothly transitioned the gesture into a respectful nod instead. Zorlath looked down at the human engineer, all 3 eyes narrowing. You are the chief engineer. You appear quite young. Maya smiled. I'm 34. Been working on space stations since I was 16. What's the problem with your ship? The directness threw Zorlath momentarily off balance. Consortium communication typically involved more ceremonial exchanges before addressing practical matters. Our quantum navigation matrix has experienced a critical failure that our diagnostic systems cannot identify. He explained, deliberately using technical terminology that would likely be beyond human comprehension. To his surprise, Maya nodded thoughtfully. Quantum navigation matrix. That's your FTL drive system, right? Integrated with your guidance and mapping functions. That is a simplified but essentially correct understanding, Zorlath conceded, slightly impressed despite himself. Mind if I take a look? Maya asked. I've worked with a few different alien propulsion systems before. Not consortium-level tech, obviously, but principles tend to translate. Captain Nixari gestured approval. We would appreciate any assistance you can provide, Engineer Chen. As they escorted Maya back to the celestial harmony, Zorlath prepared a carefully edited explanation of their systems, omitting the classified aspects of consortium technology. But when they reached the main engineering bay, Maya barely listened to his prepared speech. Instead, she walked slowly around the central column that housed the quantum navigation matrix, eyes tracking the flow of energy through the transparent conduits. Fascinating, she murmured. You're using crystalline superconductors to channel the quantum field, right? And these must be the harmonic resonators. She pointed to a series of 12 geometric structures suspended within the column. Zorlath's scales rippled in surprise. You recognize these components? Not specifically, Maya admitted, but I understand the general principles. Quantum fields need harmonizing to maintain stability. Different species use different methods, but the fundamental physics doesn't change. She pulled a small device from her utility belt and held it near one of the energy conduits. Mind if I take some readings? Our diagnostics are far more sophisticated than whatever that primitive device can detect, Zorlath said dismissively. Maya smiled. Sometimes simple tools see what complex ones miss. This is just a basic energy pattern analyzer. Nothing fancy, but it might give us a different perspective. For the next several hours, Maya moved methodically through the engineering bay, examining components, asking questions, and occasionally making notes on a worn electronic pad. The consortium engineers watched with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism as the human crawled into maintenance ducts, examined connection points, and traced energy pathways that their diagnostics had already cleared as functional. This is pointless, one of the junior engineers whispered to Zorlath. She's looking at standard power distribution nodes. The problem is clearly in the quantum harmonizer array. Let her satisfy her curiosity, Zorlath replied. When she fails, perhaps humans will develop a more realistic understanding of the technological gap between our civilizations. Maya emerged from beneath a console, hair now escaping from her bun, a smudge of conductive gel on her cheek. I'd like to see your diagnostic logs for the past month, particularly focusing on power fluctuations in the tertiary stabilization circuits. Zorlath hesitated. Those systems are functioning perfectly. Our diagnostics. Humor me, Maya interrupted with a smile that somehow took the edge off her directness. Captain Nixari, who had returned to observe the progress, gestured approval. Reluctantly, Zorlath displayed the requested data on the holographic interface. Maya studied the scrolling information, occasionally asking for clarification on specific readings. After 20 minutes, she nodded to herself. I think I see the problem, she said quietly, but I'll need to check one more thing to be sure. She turned to Zorlath. Can you show me where the quantum field first interfaces with your physical navigation systems, the junction between theoretical and applied physics? The request was surprisingly insightful. Zorlath led her to a sealed chamber adjacent to the main engineering bay. Inside, a series of crystalline structures connected to more conventional control mechanisms. Maya circled the equipment slowly, then knelt beside one particular junction point. There, she said, pointing to what appeared to be a perfectly normal connection. That's your problem. The human solution. The assembled alien engineers stared at the unremarkable junction point Maya had identified. It was a standard interface where the quantum field projectors connected to the navigation system's physical components, conventional technology by consortium standards. Impossible, Zorlath declared, scales shifting to a deep blue of certainty. That component has been thoroughly examined. It's functioning within normal parameters. Maya stood her ground. Can I borrow a molecular resonance scanner? One of the junior engineers handed her the requested tool with obvious reluctance. Maya calibrated it quickly, another surprise to the watching aliens, and held it near the junction. The display showed a three-dimensional rendering of the component's molecular structure. Look here, she said, pointing to a barely perceptible irregularity in the otherwise perfect lattice. There's a microfracture in the crystalline matrix. It's allowing quantum field leakage at a rate of approximately 0.002% per operational cycle. Zorlath leaned closer, his ternary eyes focusing on the anomaly. That's well within acceptable variance parameters. Such a minor imperfection couldn't possibly cause system-wide failure. Normally, you'd be right, Maya agreed, setting down the scanner. But according to your logs, 3 weeks ago you passed through an unusual radiation field in the Cygnus sector. That radiation temporarily altered the conductivity properties of this specific crystalline alloy. She traced her finger along the connecting conduits. The microfracture became a perfect resonance chamber for the altered quantum field. It created a harmonic feedback loop that gradually destabilized your entire navigation matrix. Your diagnostics never detected it because they're programmed to look for major failures, not cumulative microscopic anomalies. Captain Nixari's tendrils extended with interest. Can you prove this theory? Maya nodded. Easily. If I'm right, we can isolate this junction, bypass it temporarily, and your system should stabilize enough to run a controlled restart sequence. The captain looked to her chief engineer. Zorlath's scales had shifted to an uncertain purple. The procedure she suggests is unorthodox, but theoretically sound. However, bypassing a quantum interface junction requires precision beyond human technological capabilities. Maya smiled and patted her utility belt. I've got steady hands and good tools. That's all I need. After a brief conference among the senior staff, Captain Nixari authorized the attempt. Proceed, Engineer Chen. But understand that if you damage the system further, our situation becomes considerably more dire. No pressure, Maya muttered, pulling specialized tools from her belt. What followed surprised even the most skeptical consortium engineers. Maya worked with methodical precision, first constructing a temporary bypass circuit using components from her own toolkit combined with materials from the Celestial Harmony stores. Her design was elegantly simple yet functionally complex, a hybrid of human practicality and an intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics that belied her species' supposedly primitive technological development. "This shouldn't work," one engineer whispered to another as Maya carefully integrated her bypass into the ship's systems. "She's using analog components to regulate quantum energy flow." "Sometimes the old ways have advantages," Maya replied, her hearing apparently sharper than they'd anticipated. "Digital systems process in discrete steps. Analog systems process continuously. Quantum fields are continuous by nature." 3 hours into the procedure, Maya finished the bypass installation. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she made final adjustments to the calibration. "Ready for system isolation," she announced. Zorlath, who had been observing with increasing interest, moved to the main control interface. "Preparing to isolate junction 7 alpha on your mark." Maya took a deep breath. Mark. The lights throughout the engineering bay flickered momentarily as power was rerouted around the isolated junction. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the azure glow returned to the quantum conduits. The holographic displays stabilized, showing the harmonization patterns slowly returning to their normal configurations. "By the founders," one of the junior engineers exclaimed, "the quantum field is restabilizing." Zorlath's scales shifted rapidly through colors of disbelief, amazement, and finally, reluctant admiration. "The bypass is working. Engineer Chin, you were correct." Maya smiled as she watched the systems come back online. "The bypass is just temporary. You'll still need to replace that fractured junction when you reach a proper consortium facility. I've programmed the bypass to gradually reduce its influence as the quantum field stabilizes, which should prevent any harmonic shocks to your system." Captain Nixari's tendrils stretched to their full extension, a sign of profound respect in Vesari body language. "Engineer Chen, you have saved my ship and my crew. The consortium owes you a considerable debt." "Just doing my job," Maya replied, packing away her tools. "Though I wouldn't mind a peek at those star charts you've been collecting. We humans are still mapping this sector the slow way." The captain's compound eyes gleamed with amusement. "I believe that can be arranged as a consulting fee." As the final diagnostics confirmed the Celestial Harmony's recovery, Maya found herself surrounded by the alien engineers who had initially dismissed her. Their questions came rapidly now, not about the repair itself, but about her approach to problem solving. "You examined physical components first, rather than running diagnostic algorithms," one observed. "Why?" Maya shrugged. "Human engineering philosophy, I guess. We still remember when we had to fix things by hand, not with automated systems. Sometimes the problem isn't in the code, it's in the physical world where the code meets reality." Zorlath approached, his scales now a humble shade of amber. "I dismissed your abilities based on my species' prejudices. That was unscientific of me." "No offense taken," Maya assured him. "Most species go through a phase where they think technology equals intelligence. Humans did too, until first contact taught us otherwise." "Nevertheless," the chief engineer continued, "you identified in hours what our entire engineering team missed for days. Perhaps there are aspects of human problem solving that the consortium should study more carefully." 2 days later, as the Celestial Harmony prepared to depart Proxima Hub, Captain Nixari presented Maya with a small crystalline device. "This contains navigational data from nearby sectors. As promised, it also includes a formal commendation in the consortium database and an invitation." "Invitation?" Maya asked, examining the beautiful object. "The Consortium Engineering Corps accepts exchange officers from member species. No human has applied, likely assuming rejection. Your application would be favorably received." Maya's eyes widened. "Me? On a consortium vessel? The perspective you brought to our problem was invaluable precisely because it was different, Nick Suri explained. Perhaps the next breakthrough in quantum mechanics will come not from complex algorithms, but from someone who thinks differently, someone who remembers what it means to fix things with their hands. As the magnificent vessel departed, its quantum drives now functioning perfectly, Maya held the crystal to the light. Inside, she could see a galaxy of possibilities. Not just star charts, but a future where humans and aliens learned from each other's strengths rather than focusing on their differences. Director Tanaka found her still staring at it hours later. They offered you a position, didn't they? Maya nodded. How did you know? The director smiled. Because that's what I would have done. Talent speaks a universal language, Maya. Even aliens recognize it when they see it. I always wanted to see more of the galaxy, she mused. Then go, he encouraged her. Show them what humans can do. Sometimes the simplest solution to bringing species together is sending the right person to bridge the gap. 6 months later, when the Celestial Harmony returned to Proxima Hub, it carried not only the first human exchange officer in the consortium engineering corps, but also a new appreciation for the unique perspective that humanity brought to the galactic community. Sometimes the most advanced civilizations need to be reminded of simpler truths, that innovation comes not just from technology, but from diverse ways of thinking, and that wisdom can be found in the most unexpected places, even from a species that had barely begun to explore the stars.